Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Nash, AAPG, and I don't know if you had a chance to attend our meeting last year, but well, actually yes, it was last year. It was about the same time last year. It had to do with the monsters of the Saharan, and they were basically Mesozoic sea monsters. Well, but they talked about, it was basically a fossil record, and it was just amazing. And we had a chance to really talk about the conditions and the different types of creatures. And so right now we have a chance to follow that, and we're talking about the super predators of the Mesozoic. This is the Mesozoic again. Last time we went all the way from the Cambrian through Mesozoic and actually farther. But the thing is in this case, instead of focusing only on Morocco, we're going to be looking at these incredibly large predators of the Mesozoic in other parts of the world. And we are super fortunate to have Jean-Philippe BLOUET, who's here from France. But before he comes online, I'd like to mention that this is a part of a series, and I'll let Mike Winkle-Davis tell us all about it, because this is the third in this illustrious series. And go ahead, take it away, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Susan, and thanks, Jean-Philippe, for being here. This is a series that we're calling Scientist Stories of Survival, and it basically mixes the elements of geology along with a bit of, I suppose, danger, and involves incidents of close calls, near misses, maybe trips to the hospital, who knows? And so in this particular case, it's going to have some adventure aspects to it. I did want to say thanks to the Energy Minerals Division of AAPG. I'm past president, and also to AAPG. If you're not a member, thanks for being here. And if you are, like I said, if you're not a member, if you are a member, thank you. And if you're not a member, you should join. And Jean-Philippe will introduce himself, and he's in, I believe you're in, is it Paris?
Yeah, I am in France. I am in Nancy right now, in the northeast of France.
Okay. Oh, wow. And as an APG cool note, Jean-Philippe BLOUET's photography made it to the cover of the Explorer. And so he has some spectacular photography in Nevada and in I believe Norway. But at any rate,
yeah, you are correct, in Norway. Yeah, we will go to the Arctic, a small island in Norway.
Yes, yes. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
So yes, as Mike just said, it's important to know that this conference will be a mix of adventure and science. So it's not a classical technical conference. Of course, it's intended to an audience of geologists, but it's not purely technical. So I will show nice pictures, and I will show you some picture of how I've been on the field. Look for early Triassic fossil in the high Arctic, in a small island called Spitsbergen that belongs to Norway, and in Nevada. So I will give some insight about my background. So I am a geologist. As most geologists, I think, I love geology and fossils since I'm a child. And so I've been to the university to study geology, and I was really fascinated by sedimentology and everything that touched to petroleum geology. So quite early after the university, I have been in contact with Total Energy, and I worked for them either directly or indirectly for many years. I was involved in evaluating many aspects of the petroleum system. And then because I really love fossil, I was spending a lot of my time organizing expedition to look for fossil, either abroad or in France, in my country. And so I said, I really want to go back to research. And so I have been back at the university. I worked for many labs. And right now I work for an independent company as a consultant in sedimentology. It's a Thin Section lab based in France. And I also set up my own company where I organize exhibition of fossils with museums. I organize field trip for geologists, and I also organize the naturalist tour for the general public. So because I was so fascinated by fossil, at the beginning I looked for small fossil and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so with a team of friends, we find quite spectacular specimens. Here you see I am in front of a very big Cretaceous ichthyosaur. And I am with some friends, and to my right here you can see my brother, François Xavier. He specialized in fossil preparation, so he's really doing this as a professional full-time. And he can either work on super large specimens like this one, or he can also make very small and delicate fossils. Here you can see a skull of ichthyosaurs that he prep and he fully extract from the matrix. So he separates bone by bone the specimen, and then he reconstruct the skull in 3D. So me and my brother, we really love ichthyosaurs, and that talk will be a lot about the rise of ichthyosaur at the beginning of the Mesozoic. So I will give some context about the role that ichthyosaurs play in the history of geology and paleontology. As you know, the French scientist Georges Cuvier established at the very end of the 18th century that species can disappear. He had this theory of catastrophism, and so that the biblical flood killed the previous world, and that some new worlds and new fauna, new ecosystem were regularly establishing. So that was really a new concept. And his reasoning was mostly based on the example of the mammoth. So the mammoth was a mammal that Georges Cuvier clearly distinguished from the elephant, and he made clear that the mammoth was a species that disappeared. And only a few years afterward, the British fossil hunter Mary Anning, found that spectacular skull of ichthyosaur, a Jurassic ichthyosaur. And so from that point, it was with such an extraordinary specimen, it was very clear, even for the general public, that some animal disappeared, and that the creation by God was not fixed, but changed through time. And so quickly, ichthyosaur, the figure of ichthyosaur spread in the general public, and they became popular items. It was the beginning of the dinomania, if you want. And so they were used a lot in books, and so the general public discovered the prehistoric animals a lot via ichthyosaur, and here the famous plesiosaur with this long neck. So ichthyosaur is a well-known taxon since a very long time, but we can still make new discovery out of them, and that's what we're gonna talk about today. So my colleague and friend, Professor Sander, recently published a paper in Science describing the evolution pattern of ichthyosaurs through time compared to cetaceans. So you know that ichthyosaurs are famous. The evolution of ichthyosaur is often compared to the evolution of cetaceans. It's a classical example of convergent evolution, because while ichthyosaurs are reptiles and cetaceans are mammals, they both live in the marine environment. And so facing the same constraints, they adapt the general same shape of body. And on this graph, you can see the evolution through time of the body size of ichthyosaur and cetacean. So here we moved back the schema of the diversification of cetaceans stack above the schema of the ichthyosaur, so we can clearly see the different patterns. So that is the time since the origin of the group. And the ichthyosaur originates at the beginning of the Triassic after the end Permian mass extinctions, while cetaceans appeared about 10 million years after the end of the Cretaceous. So anyway, what's important there is to see that the evolution is very different. While cetaceans gradually diversify and reach a very large size slowly, for ichthyosaurs, it's a complete different pattern. They had a very high diversity from the very beginning, and they reach very large size. And then they become, they just keep one general shape. for the rest of the Jurassic and the beginning of the Cretaceous. So it's very different evolution pattern. It's quite possible that some ichthyosaurs reach a size that can be compared to a blue whale, the modern blue whale, which is often said being the largest animal ever. Also, you may have heard about a giant whale that has recently been discovered in Peru and that is tackling this common. Anyway, so today I will talk about the diversification and the evolution of ichthyosaurs at the beginning of the Triassic, and especially how they evolved towards very large size and became the largest predator ever during the Mesozoic, at the beginning of the Mesozoic. So this is a paleogeographic map of the early and middle Triassic. We don't have that many localities rich in fossils. They are all located in the northern hemisphere. Most of them are along the edge of the Tethys Ocean and are located in shallow facies. So they are not rich in giant ichthyosaurs because they are just shallow deposits. But if you want to find giant ichthyosaurs, you have to go on the other side of the world, facing the global ocean, the Pantalassa, especially in Spitsbergen and in Nevada. So I will start right now with Spitsbergen. So it's an island that is located only 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole. It belongs to Norway. Also, it has a very special legal status. Actually, you can go there without visa and without working permit. It's a very special regarding international law. The status of Spitsbergen, also called Svalbard, is very special. But anyway, it belongs to Norway. The weather is quite warm given the very high latitude, because since it's the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the ocean brings some heat. And so in summer, it's between 5 and 10 degrees Celsius. So it's quite okay to do field work. If we discover a bit the geology of the island, so you have sedimentary deposits going from the Devonian to the Cenozoic mostly. And in the cross-section, we see clearly that the Devonian sediments correspond to the old so-called old red sandstones deposited in a graben or in a pull apart. On top of that, you have Carboniferous and then Mesozoic deposits that are on carbonate platform or siliciclastic fine-grained deposits. And during the Cenozoic, the Spitsbergen that was attached to the northern extremity of Greenland separated from Greenland due to the opening of the North Atlantic Ocean. So along a transform fault, you have a transpressive stress that rise some mountains on the western edge of Spitsbergen. So I've been lucky enough to do a lot of field work here for many, many summers. So I hike really a lot around the island, especially focusing on Triassic sediments. So when you arrive to Spitsbergen, at first it's very easy. You can arrive with a plane directly from Paris. There is no problem. You arrived at the airport in this small town called Longyearbyen. You have all the comfort of a Norwegian town. Nothing special. You don't really realize you are in the very high Arctic. And most people from there, they take very large cruise boats and they go for a luxury cruise around the island. But us as geologists, we hire a small boat like this, like a small taxi. And that boat can drop you everywhere around the island, where you want. So from there, the adventure really starts there. The boat drops you on the shoreline and you say, okay, bye-bye. Please come back in 1 week and don't forget to come back. And then, okay, the trip really starts and you are in this kind of gigantic landscapes. I remember the feeling I had during my very first trip to Spitsbergen. So this is a picture from my first travel there. And I was standing here on the slope of a mountain and I realized, wow, my God, how gigantic is that landscape? And the most disturbing effect is that you don't have anything that gives you an idea of the scale of the landscape. Since you don't have any tree growing on that island, For example, it's very difficult to tell if that little creek is there, if it's easy to cross that creek or if it's a large river. You have no idea until you are right next to it. And for example, on that picture, maybe very difficult to see, but here is our camp. It's our base camp. So then you realize how wide are those glacial valleys. It's really amazing. It's an amazing feeling, really. So before reaching the outcrop, you have to cross the tundra. So usually it's very wet because the upper layer of permafrost is melting during the summer. You encounter many bones and dead body of animals because they are frozen most of the time during the year. So it's quite strange, it's quite surprising at first. The ground has very specific texture. Locally, it even looks like coral reefs. You have patch of plants like that grow with even micro atoll patterns. It's very interesting. And you are surrounded by animals. So reindeers is the most common. Then you can see also a lot of polar fox. And of course, the polar bear. Most people come to Svalbard or Spitsbergen to see polar bear. So it's fun to see a polar bear when you are in a boat, but when you are on the field, it's something else. So I spot some polar bears a few times, and I love that picture because it shows a close encounter between my group. So we are standing right here. And here you see a female with 2 cubs very close from us. So that was a very stressful situation. Of course, it's wonderful to see little polar bear, but we are alone in the middle of nowhere and we have bear in front of us. So that case was dangerous because this female came along the shore and she stand in front of us, even feeding her babies in front of us. So we said, oh my God, she's not afraid at all by us. She feels very comfortable. That's not good. She's waiting. What is she waiting for? She's waiting for the dinner. So you have to stay safe. You have to behave professionally when this happens. So I called the governor of Svalbard and explained the case, just in case, to be clear. And they said, okay, yeah, it's clearly a dangerous situation. So you clearly have to afraid the bear as much as you can to avoid a dangerous situation. So we try to afraid the bear, running at it, making some noise, screaming, but it didn't move at all. And so at some point we shot a bullet with a flare gun, and the bullet arrived right in front of the nose of the bear, and that produced a big effect, a very big noise, and the family of bear flew away, and we never see them again during this trip. It's important when you start to afraid the bear to make as much noise as possible. If you start to afraid it, you really have to give everything so it doesn't have the idea to come back in 2 hours or the day afterwards to check again what you are doing. So yes, so these are the kind of difficulties you can have when you want to make some geology in Spitsbergen. When you finally arrived in the outcrop, so that's a typical view of the Triassic, early and middle Triassic deposits. So you see that it's shaly with some intervals of black shale. And interestingly, those deposits are the main source rock in Norway for the Barents Sea area. So you see that most of the North Sea, most of the potential has been pumped already, but it seems that there is still some potential in Barents Sea, and most of the petroleum systems there are fed by the early Triassic, which is the main source rock. So I didn't study it in detail, the petroleum systems there, but some of you may be familiar with this area. We may discuss about that after a while. So some pictures of fossils now. You see that there are many ammonoids. You may call that even ammonites. Fossils of fish. Here, this pointed head is the classic Triassic fish, Sorictes. And you have many bones. Those black shells are really full of bones. It's very, very impressive. For example, you see here along my hammer, many small ribs. So here you have the skeleton of a very small ichthyosaur right here. And here you see a jaw. Here you can see I found a super large rib. So that rib belonged to a very large ichthyosaur. And here to the lower right corner, you see very specific teeth with a very special ichthyosaur. So at first, when I found that, I was wondering, what's that? It's not clear if it's a jaw. It's like there are teeth protruding everywhere. And actually, this is a jaw of Omphalosaurus. It's a very specific early ichthyosaur with a very specific teeth, which are very unique in the animal kingdom. Actually, instead of having row of teeth, you have protruding a bit from everywhere, just like mushrooms. So it's very strange to find this. You really find a lot of this on the field. And we think this Omphalosaurus may be an ammonoid, may feed on ammonites, because if you check at the shape of the jaw, they don't close perfectly like the famous placodont from the Triassic. The jaw are flat and so they can crush shell. But for Omphalosaurus, the jaw is an arch like that. So it doesn't seem very convenient to crush a classic shell. So we imagine this can be just like the tool you can use to break some nuts, may be useful to break ammonites. So it may be an ammonite feeder. And yes, talking about very large ichthyosaurs, so for many years I found loose bones, which were evidence of super big ichthyosaurs, and I was very curious one day to find a big specimen, and this day finally happened. One day we found this concretion, and believe it or not, but in the middle of that concretion is a skull. So it's a skull of a super giant ichthyosaur. It was when we found this, we were with my group, we were really amazed by the size of the concretion, and you can see on the edge, you can see some teeth and some bone protruding. So there is clearly a complete skull in that concretion, and it's likely a new species, maybe even a new genus. But we like to make fun and call it our Belugasaurus, because when we found it, we could spot some beluga, the white whale, swimming along the shore, along the coastline there. So it was really a vision of paradise. I mean, sitting on the skull of this giant ichthyosaur and watching some whales here in the fjord. It's really an amazing feeling. And ultimately, I found that field covered with concretions. And again, this place is what I call the cemetery of the elephants, because almost each of these concretion is growing on a skeleton of ichthyosaur. So not any single concretion, but most of them are growing on ichthyosaur skeleton. So not any skeleton is perfect, but when you walk there, you have bones everywhere. And since it's very visual, you really have the feeling to stand in front of an army of dead ichthyosaur. So it's a very unique place. I would qualify this place as a world-class outcrop, because there are very few places on Earth where you can visualize the density of skeleton like this. And especially in this fantastic landscape, it's really an amazing place. And I really love that place. So that's a reconstruction of the ecosystem of the time of the early Triassic. So you had a large diversity of fish, ammonoids, and small and large ichthyosaurs. And we didn't talk yet about this guy here. It's an amphibian, actually. I didn't even knew that amphibian inhabited the ocean before I visited Svalbard. So they have this shape of the skull. It looks like a crocodile at first when you see the texture of the skull. And so several species are known, but they quickly disappeared. And I think I found some evidence on the field of a very large species of amphibian. As far as I know, it's not yet described, but I think those amphibians also started the race toward giant predator, but somehow they disappeared quickly, and so they didn't evolve that much. They were not successful, but I'm pretty sure they also reach very large size. So it's really a wonderful world, the Triassic of Spitsbergen. And there are so many other interesting features to spot in Spitsbergen. Here you can see this beach. You see those rings. These are actually exhumed beach, because there is a tectonic uplift of the island since it was covered by many kilometers of ice during the last ice age. The island is popping up actually, and so you have those raised beach everywhere. I even found a skeleton of whale many kilometers inland, so you can very visualize the uplift of the island. And the Devonian deposits also are wonderful. You have a vast diversity of fish from the Devonian in the old red sandstone. Some are wonderful. Those fossils in the Devonian, they are not easy to find, but I find some plates of super big placoderms. So I'm sure there are also wonderful discoveries to be made there. So at some point I said, wow, Spitsbergen is really an amazing place. We have fantastic fossils. I have to share those pictures and those fossils with people. So I get in touch with a museum in Switzerland, and we set up an exhibition, a temporary exhibition with fossils. We describe our trip there and the beauty of the landscapes and the history of life on Earth. And that's how I get in touch with Professor Sander. He is professor at the University of Bonn in Germany. He visited the exhibition and said, "Oh, you find amazing specimens. Your ichthyosaurs are incredible. I'm working on ichthyosaurs since such a long time. Would you bring me to Spitsbergen and can we work together there?" I say, "Yeah, of course, we can do that." So I've been with Professor Sander and his team to Spitsbergen, and in return, he invited me to collaborate with the Museum of Los Angeles and with the Museum of Art in Nevada. And we have been together to work on the field in Nevada, in deposits of the same age, early Triassic and middle Triassic in the desert of Nevada. So here we are in the basement of the Museum of Los Angeles, and me, Professor Lars, and Professor Stenders are standing in front of this giant skull, which has been described in Science 2 years ago. And this animal was the largest animal ever at the beginning of the Triassic. It was the largest animal that ever existed on Earth. So it's really a spectacular example of how large those animals grow. The skull is 2 meters long, but it's estimated that the body size reached 17 meters. Those early ichthyosaurs had a very elongated body, a bit like snakes, if you want. So yeah, I have to say an interesting story about that specimen. He is called Symbospondylus jungorum, and the species name comes from Tom Young. He was a geologist, and he was successful and decided to set up a brewing company in Nevada. And he branded ichthyosaur on a can of beers. And he was very successful. His company is doing very well. And he funded some research projects with Professor Sander. And so that's how he made some advertisement having its name given to the species. And that's a big problem we also have in Spitsbergen. Look at the size of that skull in this concretion. It would take a lot of efforts to retrieve that concretion and also a lot of money to prep the specimen. I mean, if you just have a concretion like this, it's not very spectacular. You have to spend many hours working in the lab to remove the concretion around it. So if some of you have some money and want to share the money for the benefit of science, you are very welcome to contact us to organize some advertising project around those ichthyosaurs, or any kind of funding will be very welcome to work on those giant specimens, because giant specimens cost a lot of money. So I will show you some picture in the field in Nevada. So it's a basin and range area with mountains separated by endorheic basins with playa and salt. And this is the outcrop in Nevada. So you see the place, it's very desertic, it's super hot. And this gives you, each dot here corresponds to a specimen that has been found during many years by Professor Sander. So that gives you an idea of the density of skeleton that have been found here in Nevada in those mountains. This is a picture of, that gives you an idea of the fishes. So you have, again, black shell. It's super rich in Daonella clams. So they are typical of dysoxic conditions. That's super good to preserve a nice vertebrate fossils. It's also a good source rock. In this outcrop, when you break ammonite and you open them, you sometimes have some vugs filled with oil in the middle. So as far as I know, this source rock is not involved in any active petroleum systems, but it produced some oil, just like in Spitsbergen. And yeah, these are some pictures of the camps there. So it's not like Spitsbergen, but it's another experience. It's also quite difficult. The camp is invaded by rattlesnakes and scorpions, all this fauna typical from the Wild West. And these are some pictures that show the style of the field works there. So it's not like in Spitsbergen, it's more, I would say, American style with a lot of equipment, including an helicopter, because the skeletons are so large. It's impossible to just put the blocks in the backpack and get them down from the mountain. So you really need an helicopter to remove the blocks, the skeletons. I love this picture with the truck being stuck in mud. Because in that desert in Nevada, it's almost never raining in summer. Most of the precipitation are coming during winter in the form of snow. But in that particular summer, we were hit by a storm. And so the desert turned in really in a devil terrific place. And the creeks turned in rivers. We were hit by flash floods. So we were not really in danger, but still we had to dig out our truck. It was a difficult situation. So here in my hands, I'm holding a specimen we found. So it's kind of difficult to visualize, but I draw the picture. You see the size of these tooth with the roots and the crown on top. So you see the size. That's a giant ichthyosaur again. It's called Thalato archon, which literally means the master of the sea. And one of the specificity of this species of ichthyosaur is that the teeth are flattened laterally. They are not round, like it's for many ichthyosaurs, all of them actually. They are flattened laterally with a serrated edge. So that's really an adaptation to cut meat. And that's really a meat eater and a top predator of the time. And he was coexisting with small myxosaurs. So you really had this spread of size of ichthyosaur during the early and middle Triassic, from small specimen, dolphin size, to giant specimens like a whale. So all those species live together and give rise to a very diversified ecosystem and with many ichthyosaurs. So to sum up, we have an explosion in the diversity of feeding strategy and size of ichthyosaurs in the early Triassic, some feeding of ammonites, other specialized meat eater, this giant specimen of Symbols mondilus. And the question is why ichthyosaurs diversify that much at the beginning of their evolution history, and especially reaching giant size very rapidly, and why it took so long for cetaceans, for whales, to reach very large size. That's an interesting scientific question. And one of the possible answer may be that at the beginning of the Triassic, after the end Permian mass extinctions, the ocean was empty, basically. And so ichthyosaurs didn't face any other predator. They were immediately the top predator because any other kingdom passed away. And so the field was open for them to diversify and occupy many different niches in the ecosystem. Whereas cetaceans evolved only 10 million years after the Cretaceous-Paleocene extinction. And so you already had some predator present in the ecosystem, and maybe they faced more concurrence, and it took some time before they really became the giants that we know nowadays. Yes, before concluding, I want to say, since I love Spitsbergen, I am organizing trips there. And those trips combine interest about nature in a very general sense and geology, of course. So this summer, I will organize a trip again, a 5-day trip. And we won't stay in Longyearbyen because there are too many people there. You have the airport. You don't feel like in the Arctic. We will go at this hotel. And I will show you some pictures of the trip I organized last year. So I was with a group of not especially geologists, but many different kind of people. And with me, I had two other guys, Patrice Costa, my friend. He is a great reporter and he's also a bird specialist. Guillaume, which is a photographer and video maker. And so three of us, we were taking care of the group. And on that picture, you may be surprised to see Comrade Lenin behind us. So what's that? Why you have a bust of Lenin in Spitsbergen in Norway? Well, that's because I mentioned before that the international status of Spitsbergen is very specific. The island belongs to Norway. Norway has sovereignty on that land, but any other country can set up mining activities or industrial activities. The Norwegian government cannot discriminate any country setting up any economic activity there. And any citizen, you can go there and work. This doesn't require any permits. So the USSR took that opportunity to settle a small base there. It's a coal mine, but it was most likely for strategic reasons, just to be present there on Norwegian territory. And after the fall of the USSR, this small colony was left as such in the Arctic. So it's really like a museum where everything is left like at the time. The ambience there is really amazing. You feel like in a James Bond movie. They even have the KGB office there that you can visit. So it's closed by two doors that are 15 centimeters thick of steel. And you can open this office, and it's really amazing. The ambience is really special. So there is a cultural aspect to this trip that I will organize this summer. And also it's important to mention that we will sleep in a hotel in that town. So it's the one and only building still operating in this town. And it's also the furthermost hotel in the world. So it's quite impressive to say, okay, we are going to the north. There is no hotel further north in the world. And you see the quality of the hotel, it's really super impressive given the condition outside. They have to generate electricity on site. They have to pump the water in a lake. It's really interesting to learn how they can run this hotel there. Then during that trip, we will take some rubber boats and we will visit glacier. We will look for the wildlife. We will go on beach where you are it's very likely to spot some seals. We are also reasonably likely to see whales, including white whales. Beluga are quite common in those fjords. We will have the opportunity to take pictures. Of course, Guillaume, the professional photographer, will help people to take pictures. And with my friend, the bird specialist, we will also watch for special species of birds. We will go to birds colony. And of course, we will do some geology. We will visit the ichthyosaur cemetery. So it's really a fascinating place. It's really amazing to stand in the middle of those dead ichthyosaur skeletons everywhere. We will go a bit in the Devonian sediment also, including this fossil forest, this petrified forest. So it has been published in Geology about 15 years ago. And as far as I know, it's the oldest petrified forest like this. So you have some complex sedimentary events that allow the preservation of those trees in situ vertically. And we can see this very well in the landscape. We can discuss the tectonic of the time, the relation with sedimentation, why this fossil forest is there. That's super interesting. We can do very interesting sedimentology and tectonics there. And yes, at the end, it will be fun, and we will have we will share some events because we will be 3 guides with a maximum of 10 guests. It's really a full scale experience. We hope it will be fun and a lot of discussion involving me and all the guests and the people. So that's a trip I propose where we only go at the hotel. We don't go in the tundra, but if you want to go for a more sportsy adventure, if you want to camp and if you want to set up really an expedition into the wild, well, that's also possible. We can team up. So just contact me, and we can organize this kind of trip there. Okay, Susan, I think I finished my presentation.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. And
Thanks, Susan.
wow. So I really enjoyed the photographs of digging out after the flood in Nevada. And I'm just so glad that no one was hurt. My brother coincidentally lives near there. But in
Yeah,
Winnemucca.
yeah.
Anyway,
So yeah, so
so
it makes some noise in the media because of the Burning Man festival. You know, it's a festival with people making some kind of modern art in the desert. They set a camp in the Nevada desert every year, and they were hit by that storm too. So that creates a lot of problem for them.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was Burning Man, right?
Yeah, it was the same storm that hit the Burning Man. We were next to the Burning Man festival. We were also having our own festival, and we were hit by that storm. Actually, it rained all night long. We were in our tent expecting that the rain stop in the morning. And in the morning, Martin still had in mind our colleague to hike till the top of the mountain. I said, come on, it's raining and so on. I mean, we can't do that. And finally, hopefully, we left, and it was a very good idea because then the real storm came, and each creek turned in a torrent, bringing so much pebbles. So it was very fun to see sedimentology in action, to see the
Yeah.
cone of debris moving. I think it's super rare. Maybe it happened maybe once in a century or in a few decades.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I remember being at Zion National Park and hearing this, and it was an avalanche. So that, oh my gosh, I was so thrilled to see it in action and so thrilled that I was not right there.
Yeah, your brother that live in Winnemucca, right, in Nevada, he told
Yes.
you, has he ever seen any flood like that?
Not at all. And he's more involved in gold mining, so he wasn't I mean, he was affected, but he wasn't in in any kind of danger. Okay, so I'm looking at the questions. So first of all, I'd like to have Mike mention Casper College.
Yeah, in that respect, I just wanted to, I'm in Texas right now, but I wanted to say thank you to my wife, Marin. She's in Casper, Wyoming right now. And I know that we're planning or thinking about doing field trips ourselves in the future. And so if you're interested, Jean-Philippe, you contact her and we can organize something. So yeah, I wanted to mention that. She's the only geology professor there now teaching geology classes. So I'm glad she was able to make it. Also, you mentioned that getting stuck in Nevada. Yeah, the people at the concert were stuck for like 2 weeks or something like that. And water was a major concern. If you don't have drinkable water, you're stuck, right? And a lot of problems. And if you're by yourself, I mean, if you're in a big group like that, then you get attention. But hopefully, somebody
Actually,
knows that you're out
the
there.
people in Nevada, when they saw us, like French people and German scientists there, and we were full of mud and so on, they thought we were burners. They thought we came for the festival. Hey, some burners.
How funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's great. Yeah.
Well, it looks like Marin Bingle Davis has a question. How
Well,
did
and
he get a huge concretion out? Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I did want to give a quick mention that there was a question previous to that, if you have
Okay, go
questions,
ahead.
someone had asked, and I don't recall who, can you bring back rock and materials if they go on your trip?
In Spitsbergen, yeah, it's legal to bring small-scale samples and fossil in Spitsbergen. This is legal. So I paid a lot of attention to it, of course, contacting the governor of Svalbard. And it's clear by law you are allowed to take fossils and rock samples. As long as you don't take a piece of mountain and you don't use an excavator, you can do it. It doesn't require permit. as long as you don't have you don't take an outstanding specimen, of course, or you dig a huge hole. Just to practice geology, take samples, it's free.
Okay. And yeah, polar bears are no joke. You know, they would go kind of over the mountain and wait until
Yeah.
maybe one of you wandered off and was by
Yeah,
yourself.
that's part of the excitement being in Svalbard. I mean, it's super exciting to face a polar bear. Many people want to see that, but on the other hand, yes, it is clearly dangerous. So you have to be very professional. Of course, we have rifles, flare gun, a satellite phone, just in case. And you always have one people that is watching, including when we sleep. You always have one people that is
Right?
that is in charge of watching for bear.
Because
But
they'll
then, of
hunt.
course, the danger is there, and you have to be very careful, especially if you pass a mountain, for example, when you are on the other side. If you are surprised and if the bear is surprised, then it's dangerous. When both of you are surprised, it can be a dangerous situation. So
Right.
I can tell you, I spot some bears a couple of times from a boat, and then everybody with the camera trying to take nice picture, and from a boat it's something, and spot a polar bear in the field when you are alone, it's something completely different. It's very scary, but you have to stay calm, and if you practice shooting as a sport, then you realize that shooting at something that potentially wants to kill you is very different than shooting at a target. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So
But it's
there's one
part of the
question.
experience. I mean, we are facing the largest predator of nowadays. We can see polar bear, and on the other hand, we have giant ichthyosaurs on the ground. So we are really surrounded by a super predator.
I love that. Super predators on all sides from all ages.
Yeah.
But
there is not that much you can do against polar bear. Any guided tours that go in Spitsbergen, you have a guide with a rifle, and that's it. So what else can you do? You can set up a so-called tripwire on your camp when you sleep. So it's a wire attached to a small grenade that detonates if somebody step on it. So if you have a bear that comes to your tent, he's supposed to step on the wire, and you have some flare that makes some noise. But I feel really much more safe when you have somebody that is stand up and watch with a gun for bear.
So, question, how did you
go
get
ahead.
the big concretion out?
Sorry?
How did you get the large concretion out?
The large concretion is still there. We need the money to take it. We need the money and the plan to take it, and then have enough money, because if you take something and you can't prep it, then at the lab, this will require at least 1 year, maybe 2 years of work in the lab. And so we have to define that first. We have to set a plan for this monster. You cannot take a monster just like that. You have to think before. And this one will be also difficult to fit in the backpack. Maybe something that could be done is to extract the pieces of concretion. Then we glue them. We are very used to do that. And then maybe let them on the field till the winter. And then in winter, you can come in a snowmobile, and you could load the snowmobile with those large blocks. And that would be less painful than having them in the backpack.
So Martin Reyes is asking, Jean-Philippe, nice talk. Where you found the ichthyosaurs close to this place, did you find other fossils that could serve as indicators?
In Nevada, you mean, or in Spitsbergen?
So were there other fossils nearby?
I can show additional pictures of fossils in Nevada. This is a picture of a specimen we retrieved this year from Nevada. You see some ribs there, and so this is the belly of a giant ichthyosaur, and the skull. You cannot see the skull on this picture, but the skull was there next to those ribs. And this is a close-up of the tip of the snout. Here you can see the snout is cut, and you can see the teeth in the sockets. So that's just the tip of the snout. In Nevada, you mostly have giant ichthyosaurs, not so many other fauna, no many fish, for example. So it's quite surprising. But this year we find a small archosaur, just like the years before. So this is a picture of a small archosaur that has just been prepared by the team of the Museum of Los Angeles. So it looks like that. And it's very strange because this looks like a terrestrial animal. Seems obvious. But now several specimens of it have been found in Nevada in deep marine deposits. And the other kind of archosaur have also been found in Italy, in the Monte San Giorgio, so also in marine deposits. Also in China, there is some evidence for archosaur in marine deposits. So it's quite likely, actually, that those animals were also adapt to marine environment. And so yeah, you can also find this skeleton in Nevada in the Augusta Mountains, this kind of very strange animal. Look at the scale here. This is a very small one. What you see here are the osteoderms, so the scales. You see some small ammonites there, a rib. So right now, the team of the Museum of Los Angeles and the University of Bonn, they want to set a name for this specimen, and they ask native people in Nevada to give a name to this specimen. So he will have a Native American name.
Really interesting. Wow. So I just think this is amazing, and the ongoing trips and investigations are really valuable. And I think you had mentioned something about in our correspondence, just thinking about different mass extinctions, et cetera. I mean, like how and why they happen, and the conditions that allow the
Yeah, so that's a very hot topic in science. It's
mhm.
what happened after the end Permian mass extinction. So you had this
Yes.
peak of extinction, and then a new world set up. The Mesozoic ecosystem appears, and ichthyosaurs quickly appear only a few million years after the end of the Permian. And they were only a few million years after the end of the Permian. They were already so nicely adapted to marine environments with paddles, ability to swim very well. So that's very strange. How could they adapt that much from a terrestrial environment? How can they adapt back to marine environments this fast, that quickly? And it may be actually that ichthyosaurs were already present during the Permian. At the end of the Permian, we don't have any fossil record of this, so it's just an hypothesis. But maybe they were already there at the end of the Permian. Somehow they may have survived the great extinction at the end of the Permian. And so when the new world was free of anything at the beginning of the Mesozoic, maybe they were already ready to spread and diversify and occupy all those different ecosystems. So that's an hypothesis. Otherwise, it means that they have been from originally terrestrial animals back to the marine environment very, very quickly at the beginning of the Triassic. But that's a mystery that is being discussed. And actually, it's from Spitsbergen that is the oldest known bone from an ichthyosaur is from Spitsbergen. And it's a small vertebra that already has the typical shell of an ichthyosaur vertebra with, those two curved sides, like very much like the vertebra of a fish. So already very much adapt to marine life. And so the first ichthyosaur we know is already an animal fully adapt to marine environments. So that's very surprising. Maybe they were there before during the Permian, but we just don't have any fossil about that.
That's amazing. Well, Mike, do you have any final thoughts? Mike, you're muted.
Yeah.
Well, I really, really enjoy this, and the idea that the species can adapt and readapt so quickly is fascinating. And then that there are species that don't, which is also interesting, that you think that would be able to survive some of these major changes. And I think as we've had 6 major mass extinctions that are in the geological record, and then we're in the middle of one that had, sadly enough, but it's just incredibly important to do the work that you're doing. So thank
Discussing
you.
about that, you can see in this pattern that at the end of the Triassic, you also had an extinction, and you can see that ichthyosaurs, they lose all the diversity by the end of the Triassic. The giant form of ichthyosaur disappeared before the end of the Triassic, and they never came back again. And during the Jurassic and the Cretaceous, ichthyosaurs were all the same, basically. They all had a dolphin shape, and they never acquired back the diversity that they had at the beginning, like the crushing forms never came back. They were all like dolphins, all similar, all the same during the Jurassic. So they are much more strange and interesting during the Triassic.
Oh, wow. Well, this is really great. And so, Mike, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I had a question. You mentioned you had a small exhibit at a museum.
Yeah.
Is that something that would be considered a traveling exhibit?
So I did some traveling exhibitions, and it's a lot of work to design the equipment that can move from the beginning. So most of the work actually in that exhibition was designing the design. Yeah, and if I did it again that exhibition, but I use the design we make, but I recreate the panels, I reprint everything. Basically, I own the showcase, the videos, the text, I have the pictures. I have 20 movies, I have the fossils, I have everything, but each time you have to adapt to a specific setting, to a specific museum. So I don't reuse I don't copy paste the exhibition, if you want. It's just you
Okay.
reinvent a little bit, you adapt each time.
I just know that, again, I'm going to put a plug in for my hometown, that there's a small museum, Tate Geological Museum, and maybe a small exhibit or something like that that's not full sized. I don't know what they're equipped to
Yeah,
handle.
if we don't have to move the showcase, and if we send you the specimen because the showcase are super big, but we can send you the specimen, and I can design the panels as individual panels that can be print and exist separately, and so
Okay.
that tells the story of the idea during this exhibition. You cannot really see here, but the room was very elongated, and we faced that problem in this museum, how to organize the exhibition in this linear room. And we decided that on the right side here, we will have the story right now, our story of the interaction of the people, how we camp, how we cook the food, how we face the bear, the everyday life in the polar environment. So on the right side, it was the polar environment nowadays, and on the left side, it was the fossil world. So you see that we communicate face by face, two worlds, nowadays and the past.
And if it's readily available, you should put your website, if that's okay, in the chat, and that way other people know how to contact you.
Yeah.
Um,
If people want to contact
definitely.
me, well, they can contact me by email and also check the website. So how can I do that?
We have time for one quick little question. There was a comment about perhaps what you're describing was an example of punctuated equilibrium. I remember studying that. Even
Yeah, I think I show my email and my website. If people are interested, yeah, they better contact me and we can discuss. I'm also interested in organizing trip or taking part to trip in Wyoming, for example, or in so many other places. I did some field work in Wyoming, as you know, looking for the famous Maastrichtian dinosaurs, looking for the biggest of the biggest, the T-Rex. So,
well, if anybody has any more questions, I would encourage them to get in touch with you directly. And we're getting a lot of thank yous and just really appreciate it. And to echo Marc Cloisonnet, I would like to say merci Jean-Philippe for cette conférence.
merci. Yeah, it was some effort for me to have such a long speak in American, but yeah, thanks for taking the time to listen at me and trying to understand me with my strong French accent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful job. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Talk soon.
Bye.